Monster Lab, Chapter 1, Chaos in the Lab. The day started like any other team bonding experience at the underground Monster Lab, which is to say, it began with an unanticipated emergency involving several things Alex Button did not understand, and one he did. A printer. Alex calmly observed the malfunctioning printer as it belched out page after page of incomprehensible gibberish, an occurrence as unpredictable as a British summer. The machine seemed to have developed a mind of its own, spewing a colour-coded alphabet soup mixed with what might have once been graphs, but was now something akin to the artistic end of a heavy night out. Perfect, Alex muttered under his breath, attempting to gather the chaotic papers into a semblance of order. Before he could react further, Professor Mildred Crank appeared, dismissing the gloom-human furniture in the facility, yet with each new chaos beginning to faintly adjust. Alex was used to dealing with things deemed beneath the notice of the scientific staff. For this dubious honour, his assigned duties had ranged from changing light bulbs to refreshing mildly stale coffee supplies, all under the guise of maintaining operational efficiency. As he fumbled with the rebellious sheets, a shrill alarm suddenly broke the sterile quiet of the lab with the efficiency of a panicked toddler wielding a vuvuzela. Alex jumped, papers flying like startled pigeons as the red emergency lights glared into action, bathing the lab in the kind of mood lighting suitable only for imminent disaster. What in the name of tea and mysterious liquids is happening now? Alex faltered as the alarm continued its sonorous assault, loud enough to set the fillings in his teeth humming along. Suddenly, Professor Mildred Crank burst into the room, a vision of lab coat-clad decisiveness with alarmingly spiky grey hair that mirrored the chaos of her mind. Her entrance was preceded by a puff of something suspiciously smoke-like trailing from behind her, presumably part of the ongoing experiments in what the faculty called euphemistically monster containment. "Calm down, Alex," Professor Crank demanded. "It's just a minor miscalculation, perfectly under control." This would have been reassuring if it weren't for the ventilation panel dangling ominously above her, courtesy of Gary the Slime Beast, who had acquired a taste for ceiling tiles in recent stress tests. Still clutching a stray plotline of graphs, Alex blinked at Professor Crank with a blank expression that spoke volumes about his understanding of under control. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then shut it again, grappling with a profound internal debate on whether now was the time to wave a figurative white flag. The professor, however, had already moved on to glaring sternly in the general direction of the next person or piece of equipment failing her. "We've had a slight anomaly in the pressurized containment system," she added, as if calling a volcanic eruption a festive screech. She waved an authoritative hand filled with the insouciance of someone who'd been involved with more experiments gone wobbly than lunchtimes in the faculty canteen. "Stick to your post, Button. We've got this." To Alex's credit, he fought back the overwhelming waves of panic with the tenacity of someone who has changed printer toners in his sleep. His thoughts were a scrambled cacophony, pieces of at least 3 overlapping scenarios running through his mind, none of which ended well. The speakers crackled to life with Winston Bellows, the lab's inconsistent PA announcer, whose voice was somehow reassuringly frantic. "Attention all personnel. We seem to be experiencing a minor inconvenience. Please remain calm and proceed to your designated safety station. If you are with coffee or donuts, kindly bring them along for refreshments." There was something about the way Winston delivered his messages that filled Alex with a mixture of dread and an absurd urge to giggle. What counted as non-essential chaos in Winston's vocabulary had in the past included everything from flickering lights to the Extractinator Mark II infamously attempting to escape by dismantling the east wall. Taking a fortifying breath and unsure of where exactly his designated safety station was, Alex tilted his head back towards the printer and the mess of papers now ornamenting the floor. As his usual luck ran, the printing disaster seemed the least concerning thing amid the distant thuds and the ever-loudening murmur of chaotic footsteps outside the lab. The next room crackled with indistinct shouts and the tapping sound of Mandy Sparks, the security officer, rattling a cracked stun baton at something stubbornly ignoring her authority. "I've got you, you slippery blighter," she was shouting, followed by what sounded distressingly like the electronic destruction of a nearby data terminal. This placed Alex in the unenviable position of being caught between two forms of chaos, the possibly monstrous and the aggressively bureaucratic. Each felt equally insurmountable to someone who preferred quiet corridors and predictable paper jams. The lab provided high-visibility jacket, mysteriously one size smaller than necessary, suddenly felt a bit like a poor substitute for an invisibility cloak as Alex weighed his options. He could only hope that someone else, anyone else, from the hyper-competent Professor Crank to the supposedly sleep-deprived coffee-powered interns, would show up and declare things under control, minus syrupy reassurances. But even as he began kneeling to retrieve a particularly waggish piece of the printer output, Alex knew there was little chance of that happening before he stepped straight into his own accidental heroism, wishing he had been assigned a security baton, functional or otherwise. At least he still had the element of surprise, he thought. That is, if surprise currently meant feeling completely off-kilter and in desperate need for a cup of chamomile tea. With the blaring alarm still cutting into his thoughts, Alex took one step towards the door, each heel dragging apprehensions along the cold, antiseptic floor. Outside awaited monsters, managers, and mysteries beyond any of his imaginings, while inside lurked nothing more than rogue technology, a battle he'd grown rather used to fighting. But curiosity, much like the lab inventions, often led to unexpected journeys. And whether he liked it or not, Alex was about to embark on one considerably more volatile than the train ride that had brought him to the lab that morning. Chapter 2. A surprising lockdown. In the dimly lit control room of the secret monster laboratory, Professor Mildred Crank stood like a general on a battlefield made entirely of incandescent chaos. Monitors blinked erratically behind her, each screen a portal into a pandemonium of its own making. She straightened her lab coat with the composure of someone who hadn't just triggered a facility-wide lockdown. With a finger as decisive as it was manicured, she jabbed at a large, ominous button. Somewhere below, metal shutters began groaning to life, sliding into place with the grace of an arthritic sloth. The entire laboratory shuddered, as if it were letting out a collective groan of resignation at the prospect of yet another day of experimentation-induced havoc. Professor Crank turned her attention to the screens. Her left eyebrow quivered as it surveyed Gary's containment cell. Or rather, what used to be Gary's containment cell. Standing in the middle of the now gooey remains of its former boundary was Gary, 6 feet of glistening, jiggling aspiration. Green as envy and twice as ambitious, Gary was slowly reshaping himself to ooze beneath the very door that should have kept him a prisoner of unrelenting boredom and dietary restrictions. Perfectly under control, she muttered to herself. It was a phrase that had lost all semantic integrity over the years, but retained immense value in personal reassurance. In sharp contrast to Gary's methodical escape, the electric gremlin had his own philosophy towards chaos, immediate and electric. At that exact moment, it was perched above a junction box, chewing through wiring like a child discovering candy floss for the first time. Sparks flew in a joyous arc, shorting lights and reducing the already modest visibility to the romantic glow of emergency lighting. It was during this disco of disaster that Professor Crank locked eyes with Alex Button's quivering form standing on the other side of a porthole window leading out of the control room. His clipboard was clutched so tightly to his chest it might have been a makeshift life preserver. Alex's expression was a landslide of confusion, panic, and an extraordinary level of "not paid enough for this." Behind him, Mandy Sparks hurtled past with the zealous grin of an over-enthusiastic camp counselor, wielding a stun baton that occasionally emitted a feeble fizzle. Her combat strategy appeared to be part theatre, part athletic trial, as she darted between corridors enacting emergency procedures that had never been decisively agreed upon. Professor Crank cleared her throat, a sound reminiscent of an engine failing to ignite. "Mr. Button?" she yelled through the intercom, a layer of static translating her words into something resembling an accusatory shout. "Keep a record of current anomalies. Dispatch. Updates as necessary," she added, not without a note of pleading that only a laboratory meticulously descending into bedlam could inspire. Alex nodded, clutching the clipboard tighter, and tentatively turned his back on the window. His intentions oscillated between documenting the chaos and preemptively resigning. Above and around him, The electric gremlin had transformed the scenario into an avant-garde light show, punctuating the soundscape with Eat Light's very specific brand of percussive electronica. Alex's journey towards inventorying the rapidly multiplying catastrophes was curtailed by a grotesque squelch. Turning with the mechanical precision of someone fearing a disheartening expectation would be half smudged in slime, Alex faced Gary's curious bulk, now gloriously advancing towards freedom. "Hey, big guy," Alex addressed in what he hoped was a calming baritone, but likely sounded more like a strangled viola. Gary responded with a tremor that could charitably be interpreted as a wave, or the early stages of vigorous digestion. Alex made a mental note. Avoid being a peeling appetizer in official lab incident report. As such, he edged away with all the dignity of an upright jellyfish. Professor Crank, ever alert, surveyed another monitor's feed, wherein a curator of chaos, the electric gremlin, divined new locations to chew through current and logic. The flickering ceilings fluctuated like a room in an eternal blink. Suddenly, the room was drenched in a vivid blue from yet another electrical eruption. It kindled a string of memories Alex did not care to cherish again. Perhaps now would be a good time to explore shielded rooms. Perhaps now was a moment to really contemplate one's life choices and update one's accountant. The solemnity of the moment was undercut as Mandy reappeared, now with a slightly singed uniform, traversing the corridor with the utmost vigor and none of the required situational awareness. Her baton found a contact, not a gremlin as she hoped, but Colonel Victor Grimshaw, marching with single-minded purpose towards the lab's commotion. The Colonel's goals were usually indistinguishable from weaponizing most mundane objects, a mandate not immediately well received by collaborative colleagues. As Alex turned a despondent eye back towards the control room, Professor Crank's own gaze drifted towards the intricately tangled absurdity evolving across the screens. Her assurances of under control snuck back into consciousness, yet now with the vigor of a well-fed doubt. Alex, with minutes of crisis management experience and a penchant for documentation, ended the chapter with remarkable equanimity. In the quiet nook of his chosen evacuation landmark, optional appendix room, he began scribbling feverishly about the morning's captivating turmoil for future generations, footnotes titled "Things Not to Do Around Slime Beasts" and "Electrical Safety by Non-Professionals." And just as it seemed a temporary edge was gained on insanity, the metallic voice of Winston Bellows crackled over the lab's PA system, announcing a perplexing directive to initiate normality protocol potatoes. A command as baffling as it was unnecessary, but perhaps born out of hope that tuber identification might offer comprehensive solace. The words potatoes echoed as a benediction or apocalyptic ideology, all the while reminding Alex of a world where sanity, and presumably an undisturbed tea break, might still exist. Meanwhile, outside, somewhere deeper, something older stirred, curious, and quite ready to reclaim its role as an unwelcomed inconvenience. Alex Button, clipboard in hand, was far too preoccupied to appreciate how such a day could escalate further into the realms of unexpected adventure.